Dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from FederalJack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is January 28th, 2016. Hoping everybody can hear me nice and loud and clear and live. Just give me a heads up, thumbs up, something in the chat if you guys can. Anyway, I'll carry on. Cool. I believe, yes, okay, there you go. I have my instant confirmation. Thank you. The reason I had to do that really quick, ladies and gentlemen, was because apparently Skype worldwide is having issues. I don't know if it's being hacked or if they're just having some sort of global technical difficulty. But something is up, and people all over, not just in the U.S., but apparently worldwide, are having issues. And the KBS crew was having a massive problem earlier, and we were all trying to figure out what was going on, and we were experiencing some weirdness. So hopefully we will stay live and connected for you all. I have quite an interesting broadcast for you this evening. Joining me at the half-hour mark, so in about 25 minutes, 26 minutes, will be my good buddy, Liam Scheff. We're going to be getting into a few things. Now, Liam's an author, in case you don't know who he is. Liam's an author, radio show host, researcher, and he's quite an interesting fellow, to say the least. He's really a good personal friend of mine. I've actually gotten a chance to hang out with him before. He stayed here at my place for a few weeks. While he was writing one of his books, I got a chance to sit and pick his brain live. It was really cool. So anyway, Liam's going to be joining me at the half-hour mark, and we're going to be getting into a bunch of stuff: space, science, religion, myth, and some of the stuff that Liam talks about. He has controversial views, I guess you could say, on certain things, and a lot of the views I agree with. Some of them I may try to debate him on here or there, but he presents them very well. He doesn't like to just present stuff without researching it. He does extensive research on subjects when he writes about them. I've literally seen it with my own two eyes. So I can say that he doesn't mess around and he doesn't watch a YouTube video and then proclaim to be an expert either. But yeah, sometimes he has an interesting take on things. So I'm excited to have him back on. It's been a while since I got a chance to hang out with him. So, and he's got one of the best senses of humor you could possibly have. So yeah, he's great. Anyway. So Liam will be joining me at the half-hour mark. So up until then, there's a few things I want to discuss. One of them will probably take most of the time, if not all of it. The Oregon situation. Let's just get right into it. How about we do that? Okay? Everybody's been asking me my opinion on this, and Joe and I did a show a couple weeks ago about this. And we already, put out there that we thought it was a honeypot. We thought a lot of this was contrived, or to a certain extent, not meaning that it's fake, meaning that these events, when I say contrived or controlled, you could fake some of them sometimes. You could put something on to the level of Sandy Hook, but quite often you do need real blood and death and gore in order to, get, an agenda pushed, whatever it may be. So whenever I talk about anything like that, I don't think that it's all crisis actors and everything else. So that being said, getting back to the Oregon thing, I did say that I thought it could be a honeypot situation and that everybody needed to be careful. And I wasn't the only one that said that. A lot of other activist radio show hosts, militia members, people out there across the board that are paying attention to this were like, some of the people involved, pay attention, keep your head on a swivel, don't go rushing out based on emotion. It's kind of what they would want if they were controlling something, right? If they were setting something up. So anyway, the other day, the crap hit the fan, and there was a shooting, and one of the guys that was over there, LaVoy Finicum, was killed, and there's some questionable there's some questionable versions of his death out there, we'll say. The cops are saying that he, pulled a weapon, it's come out that from that side. Well, I really haven't seen the cops officially say anything other than that he was killed in a shootout. Now, the other side is saying that he was murdered in cold blood, and people are running with that. It's a very emotionally charged atmosphere right now. Before I even get into dissecting any of this, the first thing I'm going to tell you all is everybody needs to go calm down. Seriously, everybody needs to have a glass of wine, or if you're in a state where it's legal, I always give that disclaimer, but whatever. Go smoke a big joint, whatever. Go have a beer. Don't get drunk, but have something to calm your nerves for 5 minutes, okay? And just take the edge off. And think without your emotions getting involved. Go do a yoga breathing exercise, whatever it takes to calm you down. Okay? Breathe. Because reacting to this whole situation based off emotion is not going to be, it's not going to be the proper way to react. I'll put it that way. It's not going to be beneficial to you. It's not going to be beneficial to the people there. It's not going to be beneficial to anybody that might have been arrested and or shot. It's not going to be beneficial to anyone. So everybody needs to calm down. The only people it'd be beneficial to would be the powers that shouldn't be, for you to act up and act a fool, because they're ready for that. They're ready for that. Come on, look how they handled this situation. They didn't go storming in there like Waco. No, they waited and they watched. They used their technology and they watched. And what happened? What did you see happen? They waited until the opportune moment and then they pounced. Now, some people say, well, they were lured out there and it was a trap. Maybe it was. But they sat patiently and they waited until the opportunity was perfect for them to pluck these guys. And they did it. I'm surprised they only killed one person, to be honest with you. I mean, if you know how bloodthirsty they have been in the past, and maybe they didn't, maybe they were hesitant to kill everybody because of that very fact that they're being watched. In the past, they did things like that. Now everybody's on them and saying, is this going to be another Waco? Is this going to be another Ruby Ridge? So it probably came down from on high. Hey, try to avoid that at all costs, please. Now, I'm not saying what happened was justified. I don't know. None of us really know. We don't know the evidence yet. All I know is the story of him being executed, LaVoy. It comes from someone that was there. One person, hearsay. And it spread like wildfire. Do we know that to be true? Well, they were there, Popeye. But do we know if that person is not lying? How do we know that that's where the story came from? I'm going to read an article written by Carlos Miller over from Photography is Not a Crime. Carlos is a good friend of Federal Jack. He's been on the broadcast before. we go way back, getting chased by cops together while running around filming them on Memorial Day weekend in South Beach. They turned that place into a police state. But again, problem, reaction, solution. First, they allow the craziness to get out of control to where the point where the locals are begging for the police to come in, and the police response is ridiculous. So there you go. Problem, reaction, solution. So anyway, he wrote an article. Source: video confirms Oregon occupier went for gun before he was killed. And apparently it's been updated twice. So in this article, Carlos lays it out. He lays out some evidence that I haven't really seen presented by other people, and he doesn't do it in an emotional manner. He does it in a very logical, well thought out manner. So I'm going to read this to you. Here we go. It's been 2 days since law enforcement officers gunned down Oregon occupier Robert LaVoy Finicum, or Fincham, however you pronounce his last name, and the internet is awash with outrage, glee, solemnness, and mockery, along with the usual clickbaiting misinformation. Those on the left are celebrating the fact that the FBI finally moved in on the protesters, who had been occupying the federal wildlife refuge since January 2nd. Those on the right are seething at what they see as a governmental assassination of a patriot who only wanted liberty and justice for all. And that one witness to the shooting who claimed LaVoy was killed with his hands in the air is being discredited as flaky, untrustworthy, and opportunistic by sources from within the Oath Keepers, who have been in close contact with the occupier since it began and who have also been communicating with Carlos throughout the evening that he wrote this, which I believe was 10 hours ago. Yes, so last night. There apparently is also a police dash cam video that shows LaVoy not only charged at the cops, but also went for his gun, prompting them to shoot him dead. Now, LaVoy was a rancher from northern Arizona. He had always said that he would rather die, and this is right from the article. He said he would rather die than give in to the demands of the Fed, so apparently he remained true to his word. Now, again, I don't know what happened there, but if there's, Carlos is saying, and Carlos is not a liar. Carlos doesn't come on and write emotional pieces. Carlos writes with logic and fact. He doesn't come out and lie. Usually, he doesn't come out in defense of police officers. Carlos is usually the one getting harassed, or people that work with his blog are getting harassed because they videotape police. Constantly, he's putting up videos of police brutality and exposing that type of scumbaggery and corruption. All the time he does that. And in this instance, he's actually saying, hey, look, the evidence shows different. So, I mean, here you have a well-known activist who's not afraid to hold police and federal agencies and whoever accountable for their actions when they overstep the line. And here he's saying, like, he's getting information that there's dash cam video footage of this that shows that he charged and he reached for a weapon. And again, the person who came out with this is being discredited, and they're saying that person's flaky and opportunistic. So you have one person. All it takes is one person to spread a rumor or something like that emotionally, and then you get the prepper community, the patriot community, militia community, whoever, truth, whatever. Everybody hops on board, and oh my god, we need a revolution. I mean, that's that. Even if, and there could be so many different reasons why that person would do that. I mean, it could be, you could say, oh, she planted and done that, put there on purpose to cause that, or more so it was probably just opportunistic and just a way to build some momentum behind them being arrested, because they're going to need support since they're going to be dealing with the court system. Remember, after all the hoopla dies down, after a week or two, a lot of that support peters out and goes away. And then you're left to still deal with the issues that you have to deal with on your own. Ask people that have been arrested for activism and stuff. They'll tell you most of the time that attention goes away after a few weeks. So there's that. Anyway, LaVoy wrote a book. I don't remember the name of the novel, but he wrote a book apparently that talked about the same thing, the character, and it, didn't want to go out without a fight or whatever. And I don't remember if it was fictional or because I haven't read the book, but I've seen information about it. I've been doing a lot in the past few days and scanning through tons of info and trying to keep an eye on this as best as I can. And, you know, I don't know. I'm not going to make a judgment and say, oh, he did. He went for his gun. He deserves it. Or, oh, he didn't go for his gun. He had his hands up and he was unarmed. He was murdered. I don't know. None of us do. That's the point. I think there's a lot of questions about this, and I think everybody needs to calm down. There's one story from a questionable source saying one thing, and then there's the other side of the coin, the official story, that they might have dash cam, and there's sources coming through channels that are, whether or not you like the Oath Keepers or not, they've been real. The way that I have to agree with how they've handled this situation out there, and you're getting from them, from people they know, and remember, there are people that are still active duty police and federal agents that believe in the same things that the Oath Keepers do, and they believe in freedom. So they might be a member of Oath Keepers. That's how you get sources inside. Anyway, they've got sources that are saying that there's a dash cam video to back that side up. So again, when you have somebody who usually holds the police and the feds accountable, and they're saying, look, there could be dash cam video, you know, we don't know for sure, but we need to take this into account. So, and if there is dash cam video and, you know, he charged at the police, then he wasn't assassinated. And everybody needs to, you know, calm down about that. Now, if they did kill him and they did assassinate him, then that's a whole different aspect, and we have to handle that appropriately as well. And we shouldn't go off half-cocked and emotional over that either. We have to meter our response appropriately. It has to be handled. This is very delicate situation. Maybe people who don't know it, but this is very delicate situation. So the information about the video comes from Oathkeeper Samuel Culper, who posted the following on his Facebook page. And I'm going to read this because Carlos embedded it in the article here. So I'm going to read this for you. This is from Samuel Culper. If you're headed to Burns, don't. You're not going to make the situation better. You're outgunned, outclassed, and in terrain you don't understand. FBI hostage rescue teams, HRT, have been raiding compounds in Afghanistan for the past 10 years. These tactical teams are extremely capable. Consider them on the level of Army Special Operations. 2. As much as people won't want to hear it, a reliable source says there's video of the shooting of LaVoy. He's seen the video and says that LaVoy went for his revolver. According to him, LaVoy was not executed. Now, and this is from Samuel, I'm not confirming that this is the case. However, I'm more inclined to believe that he went out fighting than that he was shot while on his knees, which, if you go by what LaVoy said himself, he said the same thing. He wouldn't go out. He wasn't going to let them take him, or something to that effect. So he already put it out there when he was interviewed that he wasn't going to go quietly into that good night, so to speak. Number 3, if we pressure the FBI and law enforcement, they are more likely to release the video. The video must be released in its unedited original form. Agreed. That way everybody can see the video for what happened and what it is. No twists, no turns, nothing. So we can get a clear picture of it. Number 4, I'd also like to encourage everyone to take a breather. Let's look at the facts as they come in. If LaVoy was executed or killed wrongfully, then we can make some decisions. Until then, let's stay calm, which is what I just said. Number 5, yes, it's unfortunate that Jason Patrick was arrested. He was told that he was free to leave. However, he was warned that he would be arrested if he had any outstanding warrants. Well, he walked 7 miles out of the refuge to the FBI checkpoint and was arrested because he had an outstanding warrant. Total dick move by the FBI to make him walk 7 miles, but he was warned. Rock and a hard place. We make choices and deal with the consequences. Good, bad, or ugly. Number 6. There are currently efforts to stage large protests in Eugene and Salem, Oregon, over the death of LaVoy. If you wish to participate in those protests, please do. We all encourage it. If your wish is to cause trouble and become violent, then you will only be hurting the current efforts. If we get the video and it turns out that LaVoy was executed, then we can make a decision when we cross that bridge. And I agree. As I said earlier, then we have to sit down and figure out what we're going to do when the video comes out, because we have to put pressure on them, as he said, to make the video come out. If we put pressure on them and make them release the unedited version, And it'll be on a computer's hard drive somewhere along the way. The unedited version will make it to the internet, whether they want it released or not. Okay? Eventually, it'll get out there. We have to put pressure on them to get that video released so we can see it. And once we see it, then we can make a decision. Because we shouldn't go running off half-cocked into a fight if he reached for his revolver and went out fighting the way he said he was going to. Well, they still killed him, Popeye. If he went out and he drew his firearm or reached for his firearm while you have federal agents aiming firearms at you, well, they have their guns pointed at you and you go to draw a weapon, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? They're going to shoot you. So everybody needs to calm down, and I hope they didn't execute him. I guess if you respect LaVoy, if you say, well, he lived how he wanted to live, right? If he did go out, if he reached for his piece or he charged at them or whatever, he said he was going to do that, right? He said he wasn't going to go out without a fight, basically. So if that's the case, then and that happened, and people don't know how to rectify that to themselves. You say, well, look. It's as simple as this. The guy went out the way he said he was going to. So maybe, if at the least respect him for that then. But let's just hope this doesn't start a civil war, because cooler heads need to prevail. And honestly, I don't really see it going that way. I mean, it could, but in the reaction alone in the past 24 hours, I'm very impressed with the resolve of the militias across this country and the people that are waiting, because there are people that are just, they've had enough of the bullshit, and I can't blame them. I totally agree with them. It's out of control. And there's a lot of, you would expect that if this was if this was something that, if this was the event that the feds wanted, if this whole thing was a controlled event and this was the outcome they wanted, and they were trying to, people being shot, they would want that outcome because they would want to cause chaos and mayhem, right? And they would want to cause a civil war. So let's not give them what they would want, even if that was their goal. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it is. Let's say that's what yesterday was about, or the day before when they shot him. Let's say that's what it was about. Well, then let's not give them what they're looking for. Let's not give them the response. It's like having a bully who picks on you because or someone who screws with you, and even if you beat the crap out of them, they still do it to get a rise out of you and to get a certain reaction that they want out of you. It's a level of control. So don't give them that, okay? Don't give them that. So there's that. Everybody just needs to calm down, and we'll take it one step at a time. And I think everybody that's calling for cooler heads and asking for cooler heads to prevail are correct. I'm going to drop this link to Carlos's article because we got only about 3 minutes into the chat room. Go over to truthfrequencyradio.com, and then in the Listen Live section, you'll see the chat room link. And if you click on there, you can go over, and I dropped in the active chat from Photography is Not a Crime. And you can just go over to Carlos's website. It's the articles from today. So it'll probably be right on the front page. The title is Source Video Confirms Oregon Occupier Went for Gun Before He Was Killed. And again, I haven't seen the video myself, so I can't say 100%. So let's get the video out, and we'll go from there. And again, cooler heads need to prevail. And you see these live streams of some of these guys that were left at the refuge there, and we're going to go out. We're not going out without a fight. We're going out guns a-blazing. Come get us. It's not the answer. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out there really quick, since I was talking about LaVoy getting shot. Here's a logical question you need to ask yourself, because a lot of people are going to probably say, well, Popeye, blah, 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 blah. You're defending, but no, I'm not defending anybody. I'm just saying, if LaVoy was executed, why would they execute him only and not anybody else? Not Ammon Bundy, not anybody else. Even if he was the so-called spokesperson for the group. That's really not... Okay, spokesperson, what are you, like the press secretary? That'd be like taking out what's his name? Josh Ernst, or however you pronounce his last name, the one, the press secretary for our current dictator in chief. That'd be like going after him. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you, if you were going, you would think if they were going to quote unquote assassinate anybody, they would go for the head of the snake, right? They would go for Ammon Bundy, the leader of the group. Why would they execute him? Well, we meant that, they killed him in cold blood, but why would they only execute him? If they wanted to kill somebody, why would they kill him and leave 5 witnesses to them murdering him? Think about that for a minute. If their intent was to go there and kill everybody, put yourself in their shoes. If their intent was to kill everybody there, why did they only kill him and not everybody else and leave witnesses to say, oh my God, they murdered him? Think about that for uno momento. If they were that bloodthirsty, they wouldn't have left any of them alive. They would have killed all of them. And they could have easily just put drop weapons on the ground. It's that simple. Oh, no, it's America. They can't do that. No, this was in a rural part of the country. Yeah, they could have easily killed everybody in that car, put drop weapons on the ground, and said, look, they had guns. Don't doubt that. Do not doubt that, period. So just take that into account. I'm not saying they didn't kill this guy. Maybe they did. And if they did, then they're in the wrong, and then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But let's not be jumping to conclusions until we actually know. This is a big deal. Everybody just calm down about this whole situation. Breathe. And we'll figure it out. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, as promised here at the half-hour mark, I have my good friend, author, comedian, radio show host, researcher, and all-around awesome guy, Mr. Liam Scheff. Liam, welcome back to the broadcast, brother.
Ouch. Ouch. Listen to your microphone versus mine. What is that? Listen to that.
You like that?
Wow. You sound like you're inside of my head.
Smooth like butter, my friend. Smooth like butter. So, we have a litany of topics to get into. I want to ask you really quick before we get into...
Medically average. It works. What was the question?
Oh, my God.
Works.
Welcome back, Liam. I missed you.
Yeah, I missed you.
Did you... I don't know if you saw the newest headline from E&E News, but apparently that methane leak out in L.A. is getting worse. Quote, they may have entirely lost control of the field involved in the disaster. So that's nice.
I'm in Los Angeles, so I'm about 100 and change miles away. I don't know if you know this, but most people don't consider the Valley Los Angeles. So I was talking to some of my friends. For example, if you live somewhere along the North Shore in Chicago, you understand that South Chicago isn't really part of Illinois, and certainly anything south of Chicago, like a city like Moline, for example, to you that's not even in Illinois anymore. So LA divides that way along certain lines, and the Valley is a kind of no man's land. Although it's filled with millions of people, and many of them have money. If you're from Santa Monica, West LA, West Hollywood, the Valley. Well, where's that? It's that sort of thing. So beyond that, go ahead.
So what's the word out there, like from a local's standpoint, so to speak?
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's what I'm trying to say. Nobody cares. Listen, this is so bad and so dangerous and so scary that everybody in the country should be worried. Why should everybody in the country be worried? Because everybody who uses gas has it shipped long distance. Remember when they told us those angry guys who hated our freedom and stuff hijacked those flying buses and flew them into was it Penn Station? I don't know. So it was somewhere in New York. Anyway, the guys who hate our freedom flew them into somewhere in New York, and we were told that there were people who hated our freedom. At that time, I remember being impressed by the special effects show they put on to convince us that what they said had happened. I remember being pretty stunned by it. World Trade Center, sorry, not Penn Station. Sorry, that's my own in joke. because nobody talks about 9/11 anymore. But remember, we were supposed to be afraid of terrorists attacking our freedom. So then some, fat senators or whatever, said they got some anthrax in the mail, but who knows what really happened. And they shut down Washington for an hour. And then John Ashcroft put the thing on the statue so we shouldn't see her boobies anymore. And then we weren't afraid of people hating our freedom anymore. Well, where am I going with this? We have the most easily, and forgive me for saying this, and maybe you want to get on this, old FBI, we have the most easily, what would be the word, booby trappable, sabotageable infrastructure of just about anywhere on Earth. We have reservoirs sitting open all the time. Nobody has even threatened any of those. Only the skyjackers who spray the skies with the chemicals that they blot out the sun with, I guess, but those are NASA approved. We have these old trees that hold up our whole electrical system, those trees that they cut down and put back up, the electrical poles, those aren't supposed to stay there forever, and a lot of them were put there in the 1950s and 70s. Some were put up in the 80s and very few in the 90s. So we have an infrastructure that's ready to go away everywhere. Now, in Porter, what is it called? Porter Ranch, which is a wealthy area right near where the Chipotle that supposedly caused all the problems exists, by the way, there's a big underground cavern where they used to pump oil. So the oil engineers thought, well, there used to be oil in there, which is, of course, heavier than air, so we'll pump some lighter than air methane in there. In fact, it's the second largest reservoir in the country. Hey, what's the worst that could happen in an earthquake zone by putting a lighter than air substance into the rock and then drilling holes into it?
Oops.
Whoops. Well, we didn't see it coming. It's like the people who dropped the bomb said, well, we didn't know there'd be any long-term effects. Why? Because they didn't care. That's why. Because we're a monkey that sees about 24 hours into the future if we're lucky. We shouldn't be doing big science experiments like the 20th century, and we should all just be crawling back into tents right now to live in some sort of foraging culture, but that's not going to happen. So it's a mess, and it's not going to be fixed. I'm terribly surprised it hasn't ignited yet. How about you?
Honestly, I'm quite surprised that a lightning strike hasn't set that thing off.
I'm intensely surprised that somebody's Apple wristwatch hasn't sent it off. You're not even allowed to use cell phones in the area if you're working around the leak. They can't work at night because the lights, the filaments would ignite the methane.
Now, let me ask you this. What about the air quality?
In LA?
Well, I mean, it's already crap, but I mean, it's already smoggy. But now you have all this injected into it's not going to just dissipate and go away. I'm sure the levels are thick enough and bad enough close to the ground anyway that it's going to cause harm to the humans and animals and whatever else that lives there.
Well, it has been, and it is. There was a meeting last week, and not Julia Roberts, but the real Erin Brockovich was there. The real Erin Brockovich actually says meaningful things. And she went around and interviewed a lot of people, and she said everybody I've talked to has had some illness, either in themselves, family, or pets. You'll see death. They've seen corrosion of metal, blackening spots on metal. They've evacuated and moved to schools. I suppose the joke is that it's just part of LA. It's the valley. That air seems relatively contained among those, truly tens of thousands of people in Porter Ranch, just sort of sinking down into that little area. There was a climatologist, meteorologist talking, I can bring up that article, talking about the infrared that sees the difference in the light quality. When you look at it through infrared, you can see the methane, and it looks gray, dark gray, almost black. And she said that the stuff is lighter than air, but when it comes out, because of either the coldness or the heat of the day or the prevailing wind, it sort of collects and pools and flows downhill. I mean, you can actually see it like a fog bank, just sort of rolling downhill. And there it goes. And yeah, I guess it eventually dissipates. Now, what have you heard? By the way, have you been reading the response to this in the papers? Do you know what they're more concerned about than human health?
No, what?
Global warming.
Oh, of course.
Not that we're in favor of a huge pollution, but wait a second. I mean, if you light them, if you're not allowed to smoke in most of the valley anymore, I mean, I wouldn't go to the valley for a shopping mall these days. It's a big area full of a lot of people. It was an orange growing area that they needed to convert somewhere in the 20s, 30s. So it's in the movie Chinatown, actually. That's what the under sort of story for the movie Chinatown is about, stealing water from the Owens Valley and then transporting it all the way to the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, because Los Angeles wanted to grow, but it's a desert city. So they didn't have enough water. So they stole water from the Owens Valley, Mono Lake. They eventually dammed the Colorado over in Nevada to make Lake Mead and make Las Vegas happen. We steal, or California steals water from Northern California, and I think even Oregon. There are 18 million people approximately in the greater Los Angeles area. This is already the first mini exodus. When fire season comes, I forgot LA has a fire season.
Oh my God! Wow! As a firefighter, I don't even know why I didn't think of that. But wildfire season. Oh my God, dude! That honestly, that's a doom scenario right there. That's not good. I mean, they really need to. Do you honestly think they're going to be able to cap that thing by wildfire season? Because I really don't think so.
They've tried to cap it 7 or 8 times at this point, as far as I know, and each didn't work, and one made it significantly worse. They opened the caldera, the mouth, wider. They're putting in heavy mud, which is very rock-strewn mud, to try to put it down. But the pounds per square inch, I think I read, was about 2,000, but I might be wrong. But it was an intensely strong gas leak from a major. It's not an aquifer, but it would have been a sandstone that once held oil, but they pumped enough oil out of it that there's no pressure. Or it was originally a gas reservoir, and they pumped so much out that they decided to pump more in. So if we're importing gas from another state or country, hard to do, by the way, gas is very hard to transport. Make your own Chipotle jokes here, but they pump it underground. Well, it's an earthquake zone. I mean, how long did they think this would last? Not very long. The 20th century is now corroding into this early 21st century, and it's going to fall apart all over the place. Los Angeles will continue to have this problem, I guess, until it doesn't. As far as I know, the thing on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico is still leaking. I don't care what anybody says, it's still leaking. They cleaned up the majority of the oil by putting it about 50 feet beneath the surface, so you can't see it anymore, by putting Corexit on it and killing and suffocating the Gulf even more than it already had been. I don't know what will happen. I expect that there'll be a continued exodus from Los Angeles. Fire season will make it a mass exodus from parts of the valley, and that things will only get worse. This will tax the drought. NASA said a year ago that Greater Los Angeles, had a year's worth of water. It's a year. So a year later, I'm not sure why anybody is still factory farming, growing almonds and pistachios in this state, but they are. So it's all doomed, and it's not going to work out. By the way, I'm writing a new book that I think I'm writing it to sort of help the mind contend with the myths of this 20th century, because we live in a world of myths. And I don't mean Star Wars. I mean, that's a myth, clearly, or a movie, but I mean myths. And maybe I'll just throw that to you and you decide which one you want to hit first.
I love your segue technique. And yes, I wanted to get into myths, but because even everything that our world operates on seems to be based on one myth or another. And you could put a blindfold on, dude, and literally spin around in a 360-degree motion, and at any given point during that 360-degree spin, release a rock, and it'll fly out of your hands, and it'll hit one of these, because that's how many there are. Let's tackle science first. How about we get in? You want to do the Big Bang Theory? You want to start off there, since that's what you and I were discussing off air earlier. It was a pretty interesting convo, and I'll give you the floor. What's the myth of the Big Bang Theory, Liam?
Well, first, let me help the audience, help me by supporting independent journalism. This is chapter 9 of my book, Official Stories. And if you don't mind, I'd really like the audience to go to Amazon.com and go to Official Stories by Liam Scheff. It's, I think, $3 or $4 on Kindle and $12 in paperback. Really a steal. This is a great homeschooling book. It's a great college prep, or I could say unbrainwashing book. And I'll tell you why right now. I'm not going to be stingy with the information. But, the work isn't free. I'm writing Official Stories 2 right now, and Official Stories will take on the myths of science and religion. If Official Stories took on the myths of government and science and all the stuff that we were lied to about in school, including Shakespeare, then the next one is Official Stories 2, which I'm working on now, is really taking on the myths that we grow up with about relationships, the culture of sort of Catholic guilt, shame, and the enforced relationship structure, how that came about, the myths of religion, as we'll get into. But of course, I'm going to revisit the two myths of science, or the three myths of science that are most pressing in the modern era. One is vaccines. And I did a whole chapter on vaccines and Official Stories, but I didn't tell a lot of personal stories, and I have a lot of personal stories of people I know who've been damaged by them, so I'm going to tell personal stories this time. The AIDS thing, the HIV myth, I will explain that. I think my second longest or longest chapter in Official Stories was on HIV, but I'm coming back with the personal, because I was, just telling you the technical background of how the thing came about, how it was modeled, how the tests don't work, and what the drugs do. But now it's time to tell the personal stories of people I've known, and what it looks like when you're watching somebody, like an innocent young person, forgive me, like a Lindsay Nagel, or any of the other women, mothers that I've known who've been destroyed by this because they had a fake test result, and the what do they call those bastards? The CPS, Child Protection Services, really government drug enforcing services, came in and stole their kids and made the mothers drug the kids, and then they drug the mothers, and then everybody's dead eventually. So I'm going to tell those horrifying stories, and then to lighten it up, I'm going to tell the history of Jesus. The other fake science of the day that still gets funding is called Big Bang. You are a smart guy, Popeye, and you can tell me the difference between an hypothesis and a theory. What's the difference between an idea or a story and a hypothesis and a theory?
Well, one's testable and one's not.
Yeah.
You could hypothesize all night. Like the two of us could sit and come up with crazy things.
Like the world is flat, for example.
Right. But if you really, I guess you could test for that, though. You could just go up in an airplane.
Oh, no, you can test for it. You can go to,
you can go to a tall building and see the curvature of the Earth. But
you can go to a very tall building. You can see the curvature. You can go to KB Toys and Hobby and get a model kid's rocket and send it up with one of those little cameras, and you can see the curvature of the Earth for $12.99.
Right. So I guess that is like a testable one.
That's testable.
Right.
It fails. It's a failed. It's a failed theory, but you can test it.
Exactly, but that's what makes it a theory, whereas the hypothesis is something that you really can't test.
Yeah,
it would
the Anunnaki built the pyramids. Can't test it.
True, very true. I mean, it is a hypothesis. It's hard to be able to physically test that stuff unless we came up with some way to have a baseline of like alien technology and but you'd have to have the whole it's like Joe says all the time, but where do you get the baseline reading from?
Let's get a baseline reading on Big Bang. First, there was nothing which exploded or expanded or whatever. They call it a singularity. That means never happened before, never happen again. Theory or myth? Just based on that criteria alone. Just that criteria. Never happened before, will never happen again, but we're sure it happened.
Yeah, that sounds kind of mythic.
It does feel mythic. As I pointed out and explored in Official Stories, I really spent a lot of time talking about the electric universe model, which I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that, but it's a damned compelling, testable, reproducible theory that explains the shape of the plasma that you see in outer space, of the shape of galaxies. It explains all of the problems that Big Bang Theory has with suns and stars. It seems to work, but of course it can't get any funding because somebody else is in the driver's seat right now. There was once a guy named Halton Arp And Halton Arp, and there was a movie about him, though, The World According to Arp. I don't know if you saw that or read the book by... No?
Negative, but
Negative.
I'm writing this down now. The World According to, how do you spell it?
Actually, it was Garp, but that's a John Irving joke for any John Irving fans out there.
Oh,
So,
I thought you actually. Oh, you mean the World According with Robin Williams? I actually saw that film. Yes.
yeah, I saw that too.
They filmed the plane crash scene actually about a mile from my house where I grew up.
In Jersey?
Yep.
Well, The World According to Garp is an interesting and pornographic novel by John Irving. Pornographic in, of course, both the best and the worst way. But the ARP, Halton Arp, ARP, was an astronomer who had once had a very promising career. The Big Bang isn't a theory, but they decided that it was true. Now, if I tell you who invented Big Bang theory, we'll be back to the world of myth. So, who invented Big Bang hypothesis story? There's a guy named Georges Lemaitre, and he was Belgique. And he looked through telescopes, and he was an amateur astronomer or whatever, but he had a day job. You know what his day job was?
Go ahead, surprise us.
Oh, he was an abbé. He was a high priest in the Roman Catholic Church. And he had devoted his life to Jesus Christ, and the Pope, the vicar of Jesus Christ on earth, and so on and so forth. And he had an affiliation with a story that's in that hoary old book, Hoary, means, well, never mind. And that story goes biblical Genesis, right? First there was nothing, there was darkness on the face of the deep, and then the Lord said, let there be light, and there was light. First there was nothing, then there was everything. He wanted very openly to align astronomy with Christianity, with Catholicism, which is essentially an old Babylonian myth anyway, and hopefully we'll get into that. But he wanted to line up his two pet hobbies, and he did, and everybody said, dude, no way, you're obviously recapitulating biblical Genesis, we're not going to do that. Well, within a short generation of academia, they began looking at the idea, and somewhere in their Judeo-Christian training, they went, well, maybe we could do something with it. Maybe there was nothing. Maybe there was. As soon as you start in a sentence with maybe, you're in the land of Han Solo. You're no longer in the land of technology or physics, and I don't mean theoretical, which is actually hypothetical physics. I mean, you're outside of the world of engineering, so it's not real anymore and it's not observable. But they said, maybe we can make something out of it. So what could we do? And they look at two factors. And it took them a while to find these, by the way. One is called background microwave radiation. So they look in the area of our solar system, our galaxy, and they come up with a radiation reading. And they say, and by the way, there have been maybe 50 radiation readings that they said were the official radiation reading, and they're different by a factor of 10 or whatever. So they're all over the place. But they say, okay, we'll decide this is the radiation reading. And because we decided that there was a Big Bang, and this is the radiation reading, there must have been a Big Bang this long ago for the radiation to be this cool. Sound scientific? Again, they've had 50 candidates for the number. Totally different.
But when you think about it, where did they pull? And this is all in chapter 9 of Liam's book, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm glad he plugged it because it's a really good book. You should get Official Stories. I have my physical copy is literally, I've got it right here next to me. I'm thumbing through it. But they literally pulled that one from the ether, basically. And then it's like, it's like, here, poof, well, here's the reason why. But where'd you get your baseline reading from? Well, because it just appeared. What?
We found it locally, but the problem is the local microwave background radiation is totally different in every quadrant and sector of the galaxy and unmeasurable in the rest of the universe. So that doesn't have anything to do with any Big Bang. It's just a local effect of whatever stars were being generated in the plasma at any particular time. They're wrong. The other thing they came up, and they have to let it go. The other thing they came up with was something called redshift. And because they believed that there had been a Big Bang, because they convinced themselves that there was nothing which exploded or expanded or whatever, they decided that everything would be moving away from the Big Bang center point. and they thought that when they looked through telescopes, things were shifted a little bit compared with our sun. I mean, you talk about a geocentric world system, like what was it, Copernicus? No, Copernicus. If I'm getting that wrong, I apologize. But there was a geocentric world system that said the Earth was the center of the universe, the center of the solar system and the universe. That's very Catholic stuff. And if you were going to work in the sciences during the Middle Ages, you had to put the Earth at the center of the universe. Well, the modern astronomers have done exactly that. They put the Earth at the center, and they decided that everything should be compared to our sun. And if things are shifted slightly to the red, they're going in this further away. If they're shifted slightly to the blue, they're coming in the other direction. And because they have to be traveling away at a certain velocity, escape velocity, sorry, not escape velocity, but a velocity away from a Big Bang, then that is the ultimate interpretation of the slight redness of an image. Well, that means that you should be able to look at objects through a distance telescope, a long-distance telescope, a radio telescope, and interpret, and everything that's within a certain range should be coded exactly the same color, right? I mean, if everything started in a Big Bang and everything is flying away, then everything in a range should be the same sedimentary layer. Whoops! There was once a guy called Halton Arp, and he was a very good astronomer. And for his trouble of pointing a few things out, he was banished from using telescopes in America, and he had to work in Deutschland, über alles. He had to work in Germany because they weren't afraid of what he found. What he found was that stellar bodies, from galaxies to, I think, quasars and other stellar bodies, you can look up Halton Arp redshift, by the way, online, are not stratified in the sedimentary way that you would hope they were if you were a big banger. In fact, you have very low red objects next to, not even next to, but spiraling out of, directly out of, almost as though they're birthing out of very high red objects. So Halton Arp decided that it was more probable that the red was measuring a couple of phenomena, not just one. It wasn't just this Doppler effect, like a siren going wow, 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 just in the distance. It was the inherent energy of an object also created its redness or blueness on the shifting scale compared with our sun. And he did as much as you can to prove it by publishing and publishing and publishing these little nested groups in outer space that were combined that shouldn't have been, according to the daydream believers of the Big Bang. But they're wrong. The universe didn't start with the Big Bang. Guess what? Nobody knows when it started. The beginning and end is a product of human storytelling, and nobody can tell you beginnings and ends except Stan Lee.
Wow. Well, wow. I like how you compacted that all right into the final, 20 seconds. You blew my mind. No, this is all Liam's book, ladies and gentlemen. Really. Go read it. Chapter 9, Official Stories. We'll be back 3 short minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com, PopeyeRadio.com, and of course, my massive YouTube archive section, DTRH Radio Archives, Delta Tango Romeo Hotel Radio Archives over on YouTube. You should go check out Federal Jack Tube and the number 6, too. That's one of my other YouTube channels. I have a bunch of them. That one goes back to the back in the day, as the youngsters would say. Anyway, welcome back, hour number 2. I am joined for the next hour by my good friend, broadcaster, comedian, author, and all-around awesome researcher / human being. And I really mean that. Liam is actually a good personal friend of mine. He came through for me at one of the most difficult times in my life, and Liam was a guiding force for me. So when I give him accolades and I say he's a good friend, I actually mean that. Anyway, my good buddy, Liam Scheff. Liam, welcome back for hour number 2.
Gay.
God, see, this is why he's a good friend. He could make you laugh at any given moment. He's actually a very funny individual. We had some interesting anti-George Lucas conversations.
We did. We had a lot of conversations. Well, I wanted to involve you in not that there's anything wrong with being gay. It's a good thing to be, especially if we had a lot of conversations about the problem with movies now. And the problem with movies now is the same problem with science now. They have no respect for physics. They have no respect for reality. So I came up with a show. You know how we both like Cinema Sins, right?
Yes, one of my favorite time killing things to do is watch Cinema Sins video.
Cinema Sins.
Guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure, right. They used to be funnier because they were maybe 8 minutes long. Now they have 2 like 20-minute things for each movie. And I think, all right, what? Just go make a movie, come on. I get it. Okay.
Have you seen Brand Sins?
Who? No, I won't. I won't watch any of their spin-offs.
Oh, their spin-off, they have one is Brand Sins, and it's kind of funny. Some of the when they take some of the corporations to the woodshed. Anyway, go on.
Yes, well, the woodshed. But I realized that every movie I watched, the characters would die over and over again, but they actually wouldn't die. Like when I saw Iron Man, I knew it was an advertisement for the military-industrial complex. By the way, this conversation is worth talking about because everybody's obsessed with superheroes. Everybody's into superheroes, but everybody thinks they're monotheists. And I find that amusing because there's no difference between a modern superhero and an ancient god. People worship them with their time, their money. We dress up as Spider-Man, Superman, the Hulk, who else? I said that, Batman, a little bit Green Lantern, whoever is the superhero du jour of
Captain America.
Captain America. Never was there a more boring superhero. Ever. Dead. So this is the problem. When you watch these Avengers movies, they're all dead all the time. I mean, the only thing that can't die, essentially, is the Hulk. Every time Robert Downey Jr. takes off in that metal suit, his brain liquefies, the blood rushes from the top of his body, pools in his feet, and he dies. He dies every time. That's what happens. He has some sort of horrifying stroke incident. It's, just blood vessels broken all the way through his body.
Pepper throws his helmet out the back of an airplane, and he has to jump out of the back of the airplane like 20,000. How does he see?
Dead.
With the wind in his eyes.
Dead. So we were hanging out, and I guess Popeye was watching something, and I just kept saying dead, and he said, "What are you doing?" I'm saying all the times they die, I say dead. Look, he just died again, but they didn't show it. Like, he's dead. There's no more. You're done. Batman is just a guy, so he's dead all the time. When he falls off of a building on fire, he's dead. It's the end of the movie. They should just roll credits. Dark Knight is like an 18-minute movie. Credits. Da 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 da.
The first time he jumps and the batarang catches something, and he's falling like 300 feet, and all of a sudden the line just gets all tight. Yeah, he doesn't rip his arms out of
his arms. Yeah, his fingers break. Scarlett Johansson dead from the moment she puts on that leather thing. She's 4'11" or something like that. She's, whatever. She's just not a big, giant, strapping, muscular girl. And I don't care how good her moves are. No, I'm sorry. She's dead. She jumps up in the air and catches some alien ship. Her fingers crack into pieces. She falls to the ground screaming and crying. She's just a person in a leather suit. I don't care how cute you think she is. I still don't understand the Scarlett Johansson phase. So,
spoiler alert: her and the Hulk get together.
Dead. Oh, yeah. Talk about dead. Don't get angry. Wait. Get a little angry. A little angry. Not that angry. Okay, a little angry. Not that angry.
It's going to be in Liam's Love Book Part 2.
Yeah, well.
The romance between the Black Widow and the Hulk.
Yeah, again, a little angry. Not that angry.
Wow, people are like, what?
His penis is in her vagina. And she's saying, get angry, don't get... Okay.
Oh, my God.
Dead.
Anyway. Dead. Well, but you bring up a good point. It's like you start to apply physics to some of this stuff, and you have to suspend your belief.
Entirely.
Yeah, right. And then go, okay, I accept that I suspend my belief because it's just a story, a parable. So... How does that correlate to what you were talking about with superhero worship? I know how it does, but I mean, I'm saying that kind of to get the listeners to think. How does superhero worship like that and the suspension in one's belief in things that we at least know certain things that we know to be true and how things work and what would happen if, like, again, somebody jumped out wearing a metal suit out of a plane at 20,000 feet without a helmet on. Right? What really would happen as opposed to what pretty much it'd be like a paperweight being thrown out of the back of the airplane. Probably have the same effect because gravity and whatever that is, going back to Liam's electric universe discussion, hint, hint, go back and look that up, or just read chapter 9 in Liam's book. But anyway, I digress. You have to suspend your belief. So how does this all tie in together, Liam? The floor is yours.
Well, we suspend our disbelief all over the place. If somebody came up to you and said, I'm a Tolkienian, and you said, well, what does that mean? Well, I believe the Middle Earth was actually a certain period of human history, and it's been slightly mythologized, but there was a Gandalf. What would you say? Say, I think that's my bus. I got it. Hey, look over there. You do anything to get away. You'd say that's great. You have a slight you have a slight head injury. Are you kidding? Are you putting me on? You really believe Gandalf was a real guy? Well, we believe in Big Bangs. We're supposed to believe in Big Bangs, and if you tell the scientific community, they put on their best, sort of Futurama fan club affect. I just got into a thing on the Frankie Val show on Zen Live with a couple of guys, and they really spit. Well, the math is perfect. The math. I said, the math is theoretical. You can make math do anything you want. I mean, you who believe in the purity of numbers know that. Numbers do not relate to the way that real experiments go. So let's stop it. Well, it's science. They always say, it's science. And I say, well, what is science? Science is you taking some data and putting it into a pre-existing module that you say should or should not be true, excluding all other data. Even your data measurement is very, very limited because you have to cut out almost every other input to get this little tiny bit of measurement in this one little area. It's the problem with redshift. You're not really understanding that the universe is 99.999% plasma, and plasma is electromagnetically charged, and you don't need gravity to make the universe work. All you need is electromagnetism, which is what the universe is. And that is in chapter 9 of my book. So we believe in these myths because our brains don't hold that much. We're not the best cross-comparative readers. And one of the things I've been for years and years and years and years, maybe all my life, is somebody who just read a lot, read almost everything. And I would continue to read a lot. I would read I just would read the arguments. I was always more fascinated by a really good debate, I think, than just a book telling me what was supposed to be true according to the mainstream. The most exciting stuff to read, of course, are the real critics of mainstream accepted thought, because then you get to see the problems with mainstream accepted thought. The problem with science today is it doesn't think that it has any problems, and if it does, it expects those to be sorted out through peer review, which is like saying that a hooker will stop using cocaine if she sucks enough cock.
Wow. What a comparison. Boom.
Because academia sucks the greased pole of its forebears. You don't get into academia unless you're willing to regurgitate the semen that's been pushed down your throat for 4 to 8 years. I'm sorry, but you don't get a PhD, really, in an established field unless you're willing to gobnobble for a long, long period of time on other people's effluence. You have to be willing to take it all in. You cannot found a new field of inquiry that has, unless it's going to be incredibly monetarily profitable, like the Steve Jobs field, where he got better computer programmers and engineers to make computers for him because he was creative. That you can do, but that's pure techno-engineering. The properties of silica were already understood. He didn't invent the computer. He refined it to the artist's taste. We like him because he refined computers so that we don't see the heavy metals and the DOS programming running anymore. It's not boring. We get to float around this pretty field. That's what he wanted, and that's what he got. But that's not science as much as it is artistry or calligraphy, which is frankly what he was into. But if you're in a field of established science, you are a whore sucking an established priest's cock, and you pay the money to go in, and you have to regurgitate what they say. Halton Arp wouldn't do it, and they threw him out of the country in terms of his professional career. So if you think my language is a little strong, go look up Galileo. It's the same thing that's happening in the sciences now.
Would you say science is a religion?
I'd say that it's a cocksucking religion. Not that there's anything wrong with cocksucking, but it is a religion of filleting your master. It emerges directly from the medieval university system. And the medieval university system, as anybody who's ever bothered themselves to read St. Thomas Aquinas can tell you, is the act of regurgitating endless bullshit and making more endless bullshit out of it. That's why HIV tests don't have to work, because it's already enshrined on the pill that HIV causes AIDS. So you're not allowed to say, well, wait a second, we know the tests aren't specific. No, don't. We did it already. We're done. You have to fillet that demon. You have to suck that greased cock, as Bill Hicks would have said. He was always on the advertising. He was always on marketers. But it's not any different in the sciences. It's really not different. Now, those of you working in science who think that you're immune to this, you may be in a field of engineering where you have more latitude, but if you try to go up against the established norm in vaccines, in immunology, in HIV, HPV, in chemotherapy, cancer research, you're going to find yourself out in the wilderness, like Ralph Moss, like Peter Duisberg, like Anthony, what is his name? Wakefield. It's not Anthony. Damn.
Andrew Wakefield?
Andrew, thank you. Andrew Wakefield. You're going to find yourself in a very, very cold place at a couple of conferences where the worried people who've been injured in the way that you're describing are supporting you, but you no longer have university support. You no longer have tenure. You can no longer be published. You'll have a very, very difficult time being published in any journal, and even if you change your topic, they're still going to call you the vaccine denialist, the AIDS denialist, the Big Bang denialist. Religion and science are one. They have melded. They have mind melded at the brain and lack of spine. They are precisely and exactly one. And again, they emerge from the Catholic Church, monastery, and university system that enshrined the Bible in mystery by keeping it in the Latin so that the people of Europe couldn't read it. When the Bible was finally translated, by the way, people read it and they thought, you got to be frickin' kidding me. This is what we're worshiping? This is insane. And everybody started fighting. And so you began to have all the sects of Christianity who decided that they knew better what the true message of Christianity was, because it sure as hell couldn't be the literal truth of the Bible, because that made no sense. So you have people coming up in astronomy, and they're fascinated by stars. And then they get into whatever, and they're told they have to look through a telescope and analyze material this way. Then they're told they have to start doing theoretical calculations for what a white or a black hole might be. Then they're told if they really are smart and they want to go where the money is, they'll get into building a collider or working in a collider where they can say through secondary misread effects that they have perhaps found a Higgs boson or God particle. Talk about putting Yahweh back into the sciences. These people are so intent on being religious, they can't get out of their own way, and we can't make any progress.
Yeah, the Lord knows what they're actually doing with that thing.
Nothing. They accelerate particles with energy, and then they decide that something's happened, and nothing happens, and then they collide a couple of particles, and nothing happens, and they say, and somebody gets the wrong idea and says, oh, you could create a black hole. No, there are no black holes. Well, it turns out that black holes were invented and rejected, and invented, and rejected, and reinvented, and rejected, to the point that nobody can tell the difference between mythological and theoretical anymore, because you're allowed to do theory with computers. And I don't know if you've ever played Halo.
Yes.
You can do whatever you want in a computer. Doesn't have to be real.
Wait a minute. You mean that wasn't a real experience? I wasn't fighting aliens on like some floating ring in outer space?
No.
Shit.
I don't know.
My life's a lie.
I don't know. I used to play Earthworm Jim. Was that real? I enjoyed that. So the sciences are a mess, and I talk about it. I talk about it in much nicer language than I'm using right now. And if I'm being inflammatory, I'm being inflammatory to get your attention, the audience's attention. We generally, we on the sort of liberal side of things feel free to criticize religion. We're somehow beholden to the sciences, though, as though the sciences are the antidote to religion. But I'm here to tell you they've been absolutely poisoned by the same strain of thinking, which is cultish, occulted, so you're not allowed to look inside, ivory tower, and monastic. So you look at these guys, and they are like the monks of the Middle Ages. They say that they do one thing. They say that they're pious. They say that they worship Jesus Christ, and they're the vicars of Jesus Christ on earth, or the representatives of Jesus Christ, or the worshipers, or whatever. Meanwhile, they're running a brothel in the back and making, and enslaving women and other people to their purpose, and they're the ones who can read the thing, and they know that it doesn't make any sense, so they write these long scholastic arguments about what it could possibly mean and how many angels can dance on a head of a pin, and it's just crap. Well, religion and science should probably be excused from contemporary discussion, and we should just get to something like a more secular spirituality that should be whatever your spiritual nature dictates, as long as it's bound by a mild ethical system of treating people well, without all of the punishment of Leviticus, and I'd like to get into that, and a science system that says if we can't produce it and we can't reproduce it, it's not science, it's fantasy. So if you can't reproduce a Big Bang, then it's fantasy. If you can't tell me how HIV kills T cells, then it's fantasy, and they can't, then it's fantasy. Or if you have 15 opposing ideas and none of them work, then it's fantasy, and you should be forced to let it go. No longer should it stand as science just because you can get it peer-reviewed, because the other guys are beholden to the same greased academic cock as you are. They have their mortgages and their $1 million loans that they took out to become a PhD, and they need to pay them back. So when it's time to fight these battles out on the internet, they send their most scurrilous, angry, demon-possessed, in a metaphorical sense, narcissists out to Seed Magazine, or, who's ever Skeptic blogs, all these things. And they piss and shit and moan and bitch and piss and shit about the destruction of the sciences by the religious set. Meanwhile, you got these mothers cradling their wounded infants in their arms who've been vaccinated, who can't, breathe on their own, or can't walk on their own, or can't do anything on their own anymore. And they're saying, kid was fine, and then we did the MMR thing, just like you said. Kid was fine, and then we did the HPV thing, just like you said. Kid was fine, and then we did this and that and the other, and the tetanus and the polio, just like you said, and now the kid is not fine. Oh, you're a denier of science.
You're one of the only people I know that could take down science and religion in the same radio broadcast.
I'm the only one I know doing it.
I agree. You're the only person I know that stands up against both, because usually it's one. It's almost like there's this. It's almost like there's the myth of science versus religion, where they both have more in common with the way that they actually think, and sometimes science is correct about certain things.
Yes,
I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I agree that as a whole, it's become very, very like a religion, very cult-like to a degree. And there's also, when I don't know what's going on at CERN. You said probably nothing, right?
Nothing.
So let's say that there's nothing bad coming out. It's just that they're just idiots and they're messing around over there. Even if it's at that, their mindset is still the same mindset that it was when the people lit off the atomic weapons out in New Mexico.
When Enrico Fermi said, well, it might evaporate the atmosphere of the Earth, yeah.
Yeah, and they were actually worried about that. And some of them were worried that they were going to crack the crust of the Earth, and they went, well, screw it, let's do it anyway. What's that big red button over there do? Boop.
Agreed. Well, in defense of the so-called scientific method, the very limited scientific method is that you really end up excluding a lot of material. You observe, you exclude, you observe, you exclude, and you make a few observations. Nothing really is wrong there. We had a thriving civilization without a technocracy. We've had, the world has had many thriving civilizations without a technocracy. They've had useful medicines. They've had clean water. They've had water brought in from far away. They've had refining of metals and metallurgy, and they had what was the other thing they had? Prostitution. Anyway, if I'm thinking about ancient Rome. If you want to get into religion, I would like to get into religion, because if I'm going to beat up on the science and say there's a lot that's wrong there and there's a little that's useful, I'm going to go to religion and say there's a lot that's wrong there and a little that's useful.
Well, we got plenty of time. Yeah, we got about 4 minutes left in this segment, so we can start to segue there, and then we can pick it up on the other side. So go ahead, yeah.
Well, the thing that the scientists usually say about religion is that religion is the enemy of science. I'm going to say that science is the enemy of science, because you have every field of science totally corrupted by short-sightedness and devotion to, great-grandfather's theory, because he founded the university, and we're not allowed to upend it until everybody making money from it or whose debts are paid off from being invested in it are gone. So science is truly the enemy of science, and perhaps human nature is the enemy of science. And perhaps human nature is also the enemy of religion. But it is human nature to always elect or allow to be elected or appointed a group of kings who we worship with our fear and a group of priests who we worship with our fear. We allow one to take over the so-called secular matters of state and the other to take over the so-called spiritual matters of mind, which is a huge mistake. I think there are two grave errors that we've made with religion. One is equating religion with morality. Religion is immoral and amoral. It's either one or both. But religion has no specific expressed morality except to get you to bend to its will, which is actually how the sciences act these days. They want you to bend to its will. The other problem with religion is that the biggest problem, as an amateur historian, as somebody who loves history and reads history and even writes some history, my biggest problem with religion is that it has destroyed an actual understanding of real history, of our inheritance from the Assyrian Babylonian culture, from the Egyptian Greco-Roman cultures that we truly emerge from, and has painted it with Charlton Heston togas and a mythical, nice, crazy Messiah guy that we just equate with the Roman Empire. And I'd like to talk about that when we get back, because there's a real history that lies under the icing and paint of the paint job of the Bible that tells us a lot more about who we are, and how we got here, than that crazy story.
Wait, you mean there's more information out there and more to reality than what we've been told, Liam? ... Question mark. Surprised look. What we don't know, honestly, would fill up more space. In fact, it fills up about 99% of the space compared to what we actually do know. I mean, what we do know could probably fit literally on a grain of sand compared to what's actually, still unknown by us. I mean, we don't even know what's around us on our own planet, and I think humans have just become arrogant. Would be maybe the proper term for it.
I was waiting for you to say arrogant fucktards, but I didn't want to put the words in your mouth.
Well, there you go. I guess we're both thinking along the same lines there. Yes, arrogance seems to abound throughout society. I mean, people forget that 100 years ago, most of the modern conveniences we have today didn't exist. And if you went up to somebody and said, "Look, I have a cell phone and you can watch YouTube," they would have probably burned you at the stake as a witch. Okay, so there's that. We've come very far, very fast, and I think because of that, we've lost touch with reality to a large degree. And I know there's propaganda and the dumbing down and all that stuff, but as a whole, we've really lost touch with that. I think people need to just take a step back for a second and again shift their perspective and take a fresh look at things. I'm going to pause this because the break is sneaking up. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. When we get back, we're going to continue this conversation right where we're leaving off with Liam. Go get his book, Official Stories. I have it. I'm not kidding you. Go read it. It's a really good book. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment. Wow. Every time Liam's on, my shows go quick, but every time Liam's on, I literally blink and it's literally over. So you got to go check his book out, Official Stories. Liam, before we get into religious myth, because I know where we're headed, what other books do you currently have out that people can purchase, and where can they get them?
Well, I'm a subject slave of Amazon.com, and you can get paperback of Official Stories there, and the Kindle. Again, I think it's on sale for like $4. I have a little novella called The Truth About Love, which is a very funny, sort of cute little saucy tale of something like my 30s, without being entirely about my 30s. And it's appealing, and it talks about what do you value in terms of friendships, in terms of sex, and all these other things. It's just something I wrote because I wanted to. But for the purposes of this discussion, I think that this is really about official stories. And if you get that book, you'll be well caught up with the HIV argument, the vaccine arguments, and anti-arguments, the Big Bang, plate tectonics, Shakespeare, who didn't write Shakespeare. So I guess I'll recommend those books. But the next one, that was a corrective textbook to all the lies I was taught in school. That's what I imagined official stories to be. That's what I wanted it to be, and that's really what it turned out to be. I could give that to any 19 or 25-year-old, and they go, wow. Even if it's not entirely correct, these are really interesting ideas, and it's clear that what we were taught was not even close to being the truth. So thanks. That's the general sort of middle ground response that I get. And then some people say, wow, you really nailed it all. And some people say, you're a denier of science. So you get those people too. But the next one is not about what I learned in school. It's about what I learned in life, in the culture. When I learned about religion, I learned the fear of sex that we're sort of programmed with. I learned that we're supposed to have a certain kind of relationship and really never ask any questions about it or have any other kind of relationship. So that's what the new book is about. I'm going to go back to the HIV thing because that's just so prevalent. And because I have so many stories left to tell about it, I just need to get them off my chest, all the things that I've seen. I'm going to tell some vaccine stories. But I'm going to spend a lot of time with the Jesus mythology. I've known a lot of Christians because I'm an American, or if you're a European or an American, you'll know a lot of Christians. And of course, I've known a lot of very nice people who are Christians, so I guess you call them good Christians, but they're just people. And they tend to have a feeling about Jesus, which is that Jesus was a really nice guy, whether he was a god or not, whether he was a magician or a wizard, which is essentially how he's described in the Jesus novels. By the way, I don't do shop talk, and if people in the AIDS world or the vaccine world start using shop talk, I make them define their terms. So when I say Jesus novels, I mean the Bible. There are 4 Jesus novels in the Bible. They call them Gospels, but as soon as you call them Gospels, you grant them something that you shouldn't. You grant them magical fucking powers. And there's no reason on earth that we should grant writers who we never met, who are not named, who we never know, magical fucking powers. So these are Jesus novels. In fact, they're novellas. They're short. The shortest bit of the Bible is the Jesus section. I don't know if any of you have ever read this horrifying book. And then that's followed by the letters of Paul, who wasn't Paul, who was probably Marcion who were found by another guy, a shipping magnate named Marcion. Anyway, the history is actually more interesting than the fake stuff in the Bible. So the Jesus novellas were written probably starting 70 to 100 years thereabouts after the legendary guy was supposed to have lived. Now the Catholics will tell you that they were written 40 years after, but they know that that's not true, and they're just hoping that it's true. But they actually have no way to date it. So if you look at when the Bible was dug up, when the first scraps are dated, the more honest date for some of the first scraps of the first manuscripts is somewhere in the hundreds, like 150, 170. They always like to push it closer to 125, but you're talking then about 100 years after this magical guy was supposed to be walking around. And I don't know if you've ever played telephone with anybody where you whisper something back and forth to each other and you have to repeat exactly what you think the person said down a line of like 50 people, but it doesn't usually result in verbatim translation of the original thought. So I don't know what 100 years of a game of telephone would do with a story about a magician. People think that Jesus was a nice guy, but if you read the stuff that the writers had this character say, he said crazy stuff. He said that if you don't worship him, you will burn in hellfire for all of damnation, and that's your fate. He said that a woman can never get a divorce, doesn't matter what the guy is doing to her. He said that he was very simple-minded. He said there are only good trees and bad trees. There are only good trees with good fruit and bad trees with bad fruit. So you can never have a good tree that has like a couple of bad fruits on it. So you just have to kill all the bad trees, you see. He said that he's there not to bring peace, but to turn the father against the son, and the children against the parents. He said all of these things. He said, you who don't. I'm not going to do the thou stuff because, again, that's shop talk. we got to make it clear in our heads. And he would have been like a Charles Manson-y kind of guy, maybe a David Koresh. But if he said or he's written as to have said, if you're not with me, you're against me. So he's a very polarizing figure. He also is written to say you're here to love each other, and then he says, unless you're with me and you follow all of the law, and here's the point, you're damned forever. Well, the law is something very specific, and the law, or Leviticus, is what the Bible is really about. It's very difficult to know what the Bible is about, because it was written over a period of time by many, many different authors. It was a collection of Babylonian and Assyrian folk tales and myths, legends, about a flood, about a guy who survives the flood and brings animals in an ark. It's told by the gods to build an ark, about the gods who destroy the earth because people are wicked. It's about a fall from grace from a once perfect garden. Those are the Babylonian myths. Let's see, there's a tower that might go up to the heavens that the gods have to destroy. There's a Job-like figure who is punished by the gods. So there are seeds of the Old Testament, or with the Torah, in all the Babylonian and Assyrian stuff. The Babylonian and Assyrians had a king, Sargon, who was put into a river in a patched little boat, and then rescued by somebody else and eventually raised and became a king. That's the Moses story. You get all of these tropes, or these little repeating motifs, I guess would be the word, over and over again in mythology. So it's not surprising that the Hebrew tribes, and there were at least two of them, who were exposed to this constant Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian mythos, because that's where they lived. They were constantly being overtaken by these empires. In about the 500s, the northern tribe of Hebrews was brought, the priestly class, the intelligentsia, was essentially brought to work in Babylon in some kind of servitude. But really, they saw so much of what would eventually become the Bible. They saw the Code of Hammurabi, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a long written list of rules for a society. Well, Leviticus is that, with a couple very Hebrew spins, like, a man shall not lie with a man. Nobody in the ancient world had a bias against male homosexuality like the ancient Hebrews. I don't know why, but they did. They got their circumcision from being adjacent to the Egyptians. There was no Moses in history. There's no archaeological evidence for a Moses, a wandering in the desert, an Exodus, or a Passover. This has been discovered by Jewish historians and archaeologists, and they don't really know what to do with this information, because the mythical grounds for Judaism no longer exist if there is no Exodus and Passover. There was a group of Semitic-speaking people from what we call Palestine, just bordering Egypt, who would have gone down at different periods during bad seasons and eventually formed a ruling class called the Hyksos. They actually ruled in Egypt for a while and were chased out. So there's a memory of being chased out of Egypt, but not as slaves, but as rulers. So the Bible becomes this accumulation of different myths and stories over time. Well, the Hebrew tribes eventually got together. They winnowed down their polytheism because they had many gods. Notably, the southern Hebrew tribe in the south, called Judah, had a goddess called Asherah, who was Yahweh's. Yahweh was a war god. He was a deity in the pantheon. He wasn't the chief god. He was a war god. And so the fact that these people were at war a lot probably raised the standing of their war god. You see how that happens. It's a psychological position. Now, I started the show by saying or I don't know, maybe we said it off air, maybe we should define a myth. A myth isn't just a lie. A myth isn't just a story. A myth is something that's so psychologically and emotionally compelling that it doesn't matter if it's true. And for a lot of people, HIV is so psychologically and emotionally compelling, it doesn't matter if the tests don't work or if the whole paradigm's not true. It's just that damned compelling, and they just want to believe it, because to not believe it would be too confusing. To not believe that vaccines work would be too damned confusing. To not believe in Big Bang would be too confusing. So for a lot of people, to not believe in their war god might be too confusing, because it's just what they do. So they raise Yahweh and they kill Asherah. They just erase her. But she's still there in the Bible. Depending on the version you read, she's still there. You can find Asherah in some of the versions. She's been translated in some of the newer versions to say the grove. So she's been translated into a group of trees. But he had a girlfriend When the Hebrews got rid of their girls, their goddess, they don't know what to do with women anymore. They have no model for healthy sexuality, and at that point, women become very unclean. And you can have as many concubines as you want, but your wife is very much supposed to be the sort of slave in the house, and things get problematic. We've inherited all of that. We've inherited a culture that has no goddess, that doesn't revere the feminine in any way. We have no river goddess. We have no moon goddess. We have no ocean goddess. We just have an angry penis in the sky, angry sky god. And the only thing the angry sky god can truly do is to drive us to war. That's the point of a sky god. Zeus, Indra, all of the sky gods are always driving people to war. That's what they do. I don't know why it works that way in the human psychic imagination, but that's what happens. So the Hebrews really set up themselves for a kind of long-term failure. They were eventually overtaken by the Greeks because the Persian Empire was taken over by the Greeks, and their philosophy was influenced by Greek philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, and the work of Plato, and Heraclitus, and the list is Diogenes. The list goes on, and Greek math. They started to pull away from this idea of Leviticus a little, and there were cults of Judaism, the Essenes, the Gnostics, the Nazarenes, who didn't want to have so much to do with the 600 and something rules of Leviticus. They wanted to have a more, frankly, spiritual experience rather than a legalistic, punitive experience, and that started to emerge. There was a guy called Philo of Alexandria who was the key proponent, or the one that we have left, of the idea that Judaism was being transformed into something that worshipped a logos. Now, any Christian scholars will know that logos is what Christianity is supposed to be about. That's because everything Philo of Alexandria said was eventually transmuted or transformed into stuff that was put into the mouth of the Jesus character later, not in the beginning, but by the time they got to the John novel or gospel, they started to include a lot of that logos stuff. So there's a real thing happening in Palestine. The Hebrew tribes, Jerusalem is taken over by the Romans because the Greeks are overwhelmed by the Romans. And the Romans don't give a shit about religion. They don't care what you worship as long as you pay taxes. And the Jews at that point are very arrogant, and they don't want to pay anybody anything. They want to run their own thing. And they don't want to be like any other subject slaves because they believe they have a special contract with their God. So they keep having these revolts. And, you can't blame them. They don't want to be ruled by anybody else. They keep having these revolts, and eventually they kill some Romans. And at that point, the Roman Empire, with the full weight of its military, I think in 67 to 70, what we now call AD or CE, depending on how you want to do it, destroys Jerusalem and accidentally burns the city down, at least it's said to be accidental, and destroys the big temple. However big it was, we'll never really know. It's certainly bigger in imagination. But they ruin the place that the Jewish priest class goes to tell all the stories about the culture. And after that happened, right after that happened, after the head honchos of Marvel Comics of Judaism, the Old Testament, after the guys writing the authorized Star Wars novels go away, all the fan fiction starts to come to the surface. And the fan fiction is that Yahweh isn't going to hold us to that anymore. He's actually going to do a blood sacrifice of himself. He's going to do a blood sacrifice of himself as a human. And now you might be familiar with the story. That's what Christianity is. Christianity, even to real Christians, is you believe in Jesus so you don't have to follow Leviticus. That's it. Jesus was the human sacrifice by Yahweh, who is Jesus, if that's not confusing, so that because the Jews kept failing, and now anybody who believes in Jesus can be saved. But you have to believe. What gets fucked up for people and very confusing is that the people who wrote the Jesus novels, because there's no historical Jesus being written about from 0 to 37, 33, whatever you want to put it at. There's no historical Jesus being written about. It's not there. No matter how hard you try, it's not there. And the closest you get is a 90, 100, where you get nothing, actually, because there's an historian called Josephus, and he didn't write about Jesus. And he didn't write about Jesus because for the next 200 years, everybody read Josephus, but nobody used it as proof for Jesus. Then it ended up in the hands of a guy called Eusebius, who was a church father and architect of the Roman Catholic Church, of the Roman Empire, of the Roman Empire's church of Christianity. And he said that he found this passage in Josephus that nobody else had seen for 200 years. Fat chance. So he puts in this in like 130 words, 135 words, whatever it is. This perfect, Jesus is the son of that was always prophesied, and it just doesn't belong there, and everybody knows that. So you got to go even further on until there are groups of Christians running around, and then you get some Romans writing about groups of Christians causing trouble, but you don't get anything about Jesus except from the Christian writers who aren't writing about an embodied God, but rather about a spiritual experience, something that appeared to them that you have to follow. The problem is, and I'll pause here, the problem for everybody else is that if Jesus was, or Ishu, what it would have been called, Ishu or Yeshua in the Hebrew, was supposed to be a stand-in proxy for everybody following Leviticus, there were different groups that wrote the Jesus stories. Like how many James Bond and Star Wars and Star Trek movies have there been with how many different writers? And they don't always collaborate with each other. They never do. I mean, how screwed up is the X-Men franchise now, by the way? I mean, it doesn't make any fucking sense because you've had too many people in it and they didn't like what the other person did, so they changed it. Well, there were people who wrote these Jesus novels. The first Jesus novel was attributed to a character called Mark, and it was a very basic sort of passion play, the kind that would have been performed around and then translated into a written form. Well, it didn't really make a lot of sense. Nothing had to do with Palestine. All of the locations were wrong. It just didn't really work for the Jewish crowd that was familiar with Palestine. So somebody came along and said, "We'll punch it up for Palestine," and they did. And then they really put in a lot of this Old Testament messianic stuff. And then they get these lines, I'm here to uphold every word of the law. Don't think I'm not up here to hold the law. And that's Leviticus. So the fundamentalists in America who end up following Leviticus and thinking that women can't cut their hair and men can't cut their beards and you're not allowed to get tattoos and you can't do this on a Sunday and you have to kill the fatted ox this way and all the rest of that, and you can't lie with a man and you can't lie with a woman who's having menses and so on and so forth. I hate to say it, but they're right. They're right. They're not right morally or ethically, but they are logically more correct about what's happening in this crazy Bible thing, because Jesus is really there to bear the weight of Leviticus, and the writers have Jesus say, I'm here to uphold the law. So if you want to follow that, and God help you if you do, you have to follow Leviticus. Now, they're right, but they're crazy. I mean, they're logically right, but they're morally, ethically, psychologically, and emotionally wrong in every way. So I'm going to pause there. So just the summary is the Bible is about Leviticus, and Jesus is about sacrificing himself because the Jews were never good enough for their God.
I know you wanted to talk about Leviticus, and you brought it up earlier. And every time you mention it, I always think, well, I'd be dead for this. I'd be dead for this. I mean, there's a list of reasons why I'd have to be taken out to the woodshed and shot, based on Leviticus. And not one person, I don't think there's anybody out here right now alive listening to the broadcast that actually, if we went by the rules, quote unquote, in Leviticus, that would be allowed to live. I think everybody would be dead. I think it would be a massive episode of You're Dead. Everybody's dead.
And that's the truth. Now, Leviticus was written by this tribe again that had been sort of ensconced to some degree in Babylon and then absorbed all these myths. But the Leviticus is really a set of rules about what separates their tribe from the tribes that are surrounding them and often enslaving them, or at least pressuring them. And the reason there's so many prohibitions against worshiping other gods is because there were so many other gods. It's not like it's not like everybody said, no, there's one God. But I just want to make a fatted calf idol. I just want to make a golden calf and worship it. No, there were other gods. There are other gods in the Bible. You can find lists of the gods that are named in the Bible as being quite real. This is the Canaanite god. This is the Midianite god. These are their gods. They're not fake. These are their gods. Like, really, these are their gods. But you can't worship them if you're Hebrew. That makes you Hebrew. So everybody who's a Christian is a Jew. And I know that's upsetting to a lot of people, but l'chaim, you can go to the Chinese restaurant on Christmas now instead of celebrating that ridiculous holiday, like the rest of the Jewish families used to do. Everybody who's a Christian is a Jew because they're trying to get back to the Hebrew law, which doesn't make any sense because the Hebrew law was for a desert tribe in a very, very highly contested area. It was a warlike tribe. It was a herding culture rather than a farming or foraging culture. And it was a rather unpleasant way and place and time to live. So why do we care? Because people are very attracted to mythos. And you can tell that when you take mythology away, people make more mythology. When you take religion away, people invent Big Bang. When you take Leviticus away, people tell you that you're going to die if you have sex, and they call that HIV. If you take the rules about chastity away, people say that you're going to die if you have sex, and they call it HPV, but it'll take a lot longer. One way or the other, we're going to get ourselves. And unless I think you're sort of a fair-minded secular polytheist and you decide that everything is the spirit and that nothing is not the spirit, therefore you shouldn't take any one thing as the final answer, and you really are here to do relative kindness rather than relative harm. But again, the great mistake of religion is that people conflate religion with morality, and they conflate it with history. Both of those are not true, and both of those will probably be a large part of what constantly destroys us, I think.
I like how you tie everything in together when you explain this, and you do so with humor and smart ass remarks here and there, which is very much so needed. You need that sarcasm. I think it helps deliver some of the information easier. It helps make people digest it a little easier. What's that old ditty? If you're going to tell people the truth, make them laugh, or otherwise they'll kill you. Something to that effect.
Yeah. One thumb in the stink. One thing. No. That's something else.
You're speaking of the shocker, you dirty bastard. Anyway, Liam, we have about 3.5 minutes. I want you to shamelessly plug your radio broadcasts because I know you are a broadcaster as well. So go ahead and plug your broadcast so people can tune in. Because I know people, if the newer listeners that haven't heard you before, this is the first time they're going to want to listen to what you've had to say in the past, and they can listen to your archives. The shows
on Truth Frequency Radio.
Well,
I've been on TFR for years now with Chris and Cherie and Joe and Kev and you and Hangar 18, may it rest in peace. And I even did a voiceover for Hangar 18. And it's Hangar 18.
It's buried by the ice wall.
Buried by the ice wall of Fukushima. Oh, talk about science. Fukushima. My show runs on Truth Frequency Radio on Thursdays. I think it's at noon on the East Coast, or is it noon on the West Coast? So 3 o'clock on the East Coast. The show runs on UCY TV on Sunday nights. That's where my shows are right now. Certainly anybody else can pick me up if they want to ask me, as long as they're a nice, reputable mom-and-pop outfit. Let's see. My books are Official Stories and The Truth About Love. There are a couple others. There's some plays and comics, but those are the two big ones. And Official Stories is the big one, and it's the one I'm writing the sequel to. My website is my name, LIAM, SCH like school, EFF. And I have a PayPal account in case you really feel like I'm worth donating to, because I do research that other people don't do. And like Popeye said, I really am the only person I know saying, look, religion and science are two sides of the same coin. It's not something that gets said very much, and most people don't sort of have the experience in the research to know exactly what they mean. They may sense it, but they're too busy with other things to really get into it. But, I didn't have kids. I held off on all of that kind of stuff, so I was just able to read. So I have a PayPal account on my Facebook, on my YouTube account. There's a YouTube channel. It's Liam Scheff. Just look me up. You'll find the AIDS clowns, the AIDS Nazis, just sort of writing really loving things about me because they're so brave and they're so willing to debate in public places. They're so courageous. The AIDS industry, so brave. Always willing to just, if you ask to debate, they don't say terrible things about you and libel you and slander you. They'll just come to a university and really debate you and just keep it simple and let other people learn. No, of course that's not true. So you'll see that written about me by that. And sometimes I'll get knocked for having said a few things about 9/11 too, like, hey, it was an inside job.
You think? Anyway. the break is coming up. We are out of time, Liam. I encourage everybody to go buy his book. Ladies and gentlemen, Liam is interesting, to say the least. And I thank you, brother, for coming on and hanging out. I got to get you back on soon again.
And I thank you, brother, for having me on your excellent show. You're an excellent broadcaster.
Oh, you are as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Liam...
Yay.
Liam really knows how to derail people, too. He's such a prick sometimes. Liam, as always, it's a pleasure, my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. Mike and Kristan are coming up. As I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. We're out of here.